As many of you know, the Kindergarten Matters series was created with the intention of lifting up the importance of the kindergarten year and to highlight the ways in which we can develop the year to be as beneficial as possible. Today, we're very excited to share some extremely beneficial research and information from various experts and thought leaders about the power of play in the kindergarten classroom and other elementary years as well. With our expert panelists and commentators, we'll dig into how and why play is an essential tool for learning and how it can be used to blend skills like problem solving, creativity, and self-regulation. I don't want to take up too much time, so I'm excited to introduce today's panel. Please note that the bios will be linked in the chat, just sharing a preview of who we have here with us today. You'll first be hearing from Dr. Kathy Hirsch-Pasek. Kathy is a professor of psychology at Temple University and has become a leading voice in the active playful learning space. Her initiative, Playful Learning Landscapes, reimagines cities and public squares as places with science-infused designs that enhance academic and social opportunities. We're also lucky to hear from a panel of expert commentators today. Dr. Loretta Brady is a licensed clinical psychologist and professor of psychology at St. Anselm College, where she directs Community Resilience and Social Equity Lab. She previously served as co-director for the Center for Teaching Excellence. Chrissy Callum is an accomplished early childhood educator with over 25 years of experience. Currently teaching kindergarten, Christy is passionate about creating a learning environment that is creative, explorative, collaborative, active, and immersive. Dr. Debbie Leslie is the Director of Early Childhood Initiatives at the University of Chicago with the STEM Education Program, where she draws on her math and science background and expertise in early childhood education to work on a wide range of projects. Dr. Kimberly Nesbitt is primary investigator in early childhood initiative at the University of New Hampshire. Her research focuses on the development of cognition in early childhood, with a focus on identifying instructional practices that enable young children from diverse backgrounds to learn and achieve in early educational environments. And guiding us through our conversation today as moderator is Dr. Diana Green, Chief Executive Officer of the Children's Literacy Initiative. Dr. Green has served in public education for over 37 years, previously holding roles as a classroom teacher, school principal, director of professional learning, deputy superintendent, and most recently serving as the superintendent of Duval County Public Schools, the 20th largest school district in the nation. I'm tired just from reading the bio, so I can't imagine how you feel. But very excited to have all of these renowned panelists with us today for our conversation. And with that, I'm excited to turn it over to Dr. Green, who will get us started.
Well, thank you, Sierra. And I'm so excited for this opportunity to speak to these commentators today about a powerful topic, playful learning. It is an approach that engages children in their education, just like Sierra said, fostering creativity, curiosity, and critical thinking skills. It creates an environment where children can explore, imagine, and make connections between what they are learning and the world around them. This method is especially impactful for children of all backgrounds, but it is particularly vital for Black and Brown students who often face barriers to equitable, joyful learning experiences. As the CEO of Children's Literacy Initiative, this is one of the areas that we focus with all the community daycares and teachers that we work with to ensure that all children, no matter their background, can have access to joyful learning experiences. It's conversations like these are important because they bring attention to the growing body of research that supports playful learning as a key strategy for improving educational outcomes. Studies have shown that when children learn through play, they are more likely to develop literacy skills, problem-solving abilities, and social emotional growth, elements that are essential for lifelong success. Uplifting the significance of playful learning ensures that we prioritize approaches that not only help children achieve academic success, but also nurture their love of learning. It is indeed, again, my pleasure to be the host today. And First, who will be bringing information to us will be Kathy. And Kathy, I'm going to ask you real quickly, could you please share a little bit about your career? Because playful learning has been basically the majority of your career. And for those unfamiliar, can you give us a quick history and explanation of playful learning in the classroom and why you feel it's so crucial to uplift playful learning?
Well, I will definitely do that. And I just want to say thank you so much, Diane. It's such an honor to be here today. The other thing I would like to say before I go to some of the slides that I have is that what you're about to see had a lot of participants who helped make this research happen. Teachers, coaches, principals, scientists. What we did is we all worked together to create what we're calling active playful learning. And I promise I'm going to get to the answer to your question in just a bit as I put that in the context of the slides I'm going to share. So let's see if the tech works. Here we go. Looking pretty good. All right, you should see it now. And let me tell you about active playful learning. What I'm going to show you is a three-part equation that will support optimal student outcomes in your school and actually will also have more joyful learning and deeper learning. So let's see if that can work. I think we all know that something's gone wrong. Harari put it best when he said the Industrial Revolution has bequeathed the production line theory of education. It's easy to laugh at the model, and almost everyone agrees. But no matter its past achievements, it's now bankrupt in a world of AI and ChatGPT. Now, for very young kids, while the research is mixed, Peg Birchinall just wrote in her journal, in the journal Science, there is evidence of the potential for today's early education programs to accomplish their goals of improving long-term outcomes for many children, and I would say even for all children. So the question is, how do we do this? How do we meet this promise? This is the boldest thing I'm going to say all day. So get ready. If we taught in the way that human brains learned, children would learn better. So what does that actually look like? Well, it turns out there's a lot of scientific evidence to tell us that kids learn when they're active, not passive. And I'll admit, as an adult, I learn better when I'm active than passive as well. We learn better when we're engaged, not distracted, when it's meaningful to us, when we're socially interactive with our teacher and with other children. When it's iterative, that means we present it in multiple ways. And yes, it is actually true that you learn better when you're having fun than when you're not having fun. When we focus on how children learn, we also may do better on what they're now calling competency-based skills, or a breadth of skills that children can learn. We call those the 6 Cs. They learn better collaborations, how to work with one another, how to communicate with one another, and communication is based on collaboration. Content, it turns out, is based on communication and collaboration. Critical thinking, which is dependent on content. Creative innovation, which is also dependent on content. And this one I shoehorned just a little bit, but I'm happy to tell you that Angela Duckworth said it's okay to put grit in there, and we shoehorned growth mindset in there. So these are what we call the 6 Cs, outcomes of what you can get in playful learning. Finally, and critically, it's really important to nurture that home to school connection. I know the level reading campaign has been doing this for years, but we have to go into the communities. We have to hear parents. We have to hear what's meaningful to them and to their children, and to make sure that the way we teach embraces those cultural and community voices. So that gave us what we called our three-part equation. The first is to listen to the community and family values. The second is to embrace how children learn. And it just so happens that when you're active and engaged, when it's meaningful, it's socially interactive, it's iterative, and it's joyful. It's also playful. And when you add a learning goal to that, then you also get what we call guided play. More about that in just a sec. And you get as an outcome the what of learning, what we call the 6 C's. So, is there any evidence that we really need active playful learning? Yes. We just did a review of 1,100 schools to look at what's going on in kindergartens and first grades across the country. I'm sorry, not 1,100 schools, 1,100 observations of what's going on in classrooms. And Kim Nesbitt from New Hampshire can also show you data, and I will show you in just a minute some of the data that came from her earlier work. Let's just look. Most of the time, children in school are engaged in what we call parallel instruction. 50% of the time, they are sitting at their desks, doing worksheets, doing independent work, or being talked at, not with, by teachers. Next, 26% of the time, they're doing something non-academic. They're unoccupied an additional 16% of the time. So you might ask, how much of the time are they actually working together? How much of the time are they hearing questions and answering questions and getting into discussions? 5% for collaborative instruction and 2% of being social. Something's not working here. So what do we mean by active, playful learning in the classroom? Well, we look at this on a continuum. The first part of the continuum is what we call free play. And I apologize, the phone's ringing in the background, but I live in Pennsylvania and we are getting more campaign calls than you can imagine. Anyway, in free play, there's no explicit learning goal. It's initiated by the child. There is active child involvement and active choice and agency by the child. In direct instruction, the explicit learning goal is there, but it's the teacher who initiates what's going on in that classroom. Is there any active involvement? No. Is there any child agency? No. So we created another category, and that category is guided play, where you have an explicit learning goal. The teacher might initiate, as in a children's museum or a well-designed classroom or lesson plan, but the child has active involvement and, in fact, has agency and choice in the learning. That's what we call guided play. And in study after study after study that's done in the scientific literature, you get better outcomes with guided play than you do from direct instruction or from free play. Doesn't mean you shouldn't have free play in your classroom. Just means that if you have an explicit learning goal, go to guided play. So how do we know it works? This is a meta-analysis, which means gobs of studies put together by Skeen in 2022. And here you can see what Diane told you earlier. Early literacy skills, expressive vocabulary, math skills, shape knowledge, task switching, which is that executive function skill, pro-social behaviors, they all work better in guided play than in direct instruction. Wow. So given that, and some of the research that we all have on guided play in the scientific domain, we were awarded a large grant by the Lego Foundation to take a peek at what we could do in 4 states and to scale this in kindergarten up to 4th grade. The states, California, Illinois, which is hidden there, Virginia, and Texas. And what we were going to do is come up with a coach-based intervention in these grades. Coaches working with teachers to help you learn not a curriculum, but the pedagogy of how to teach the curriculum you already have. And we've been doing that now around the country. What are the 6 behaviors that will allow you to create an active playful learning classroom? 1, break up the classroom a little bit to have small and paired groups. 2, increase student contributions. You should be hearing active, engaged, meaningful, socially interactive. What we did is we came up with real behaviors, practical behaviors designed by teachers and scientists together so that we could create a classroom that was active playful learning, support hands-on and minds-on activities, exploration and discovery, give students choice and voice, help students connect their learning to other experiences, both in and out of school. And yes, make it fun, make it joyful. So what does this actually look like? I'm going to show you, and I hope it works, one math lesson from our group in California, Santa Ana, California. And here we go. Why is we do not have any sound? I.
Oh, oh, there we go.
I will cut this because of time, but I hope you can all tell the kids were having a blast in this classroom. And yes, they were learning how to do sets of 5, 4, 3, checking it, and even graphing it. Not bad for kindergarten and first grade. So now that we've looked at it, my machine has decided not to work anymore. Here we go. What are the teachers saying about what they're learning? Are the kids getting anything out of it in the 6 C's? Well, here's what they told us. This is teacher report, collaboration up, communication 100%, critical thinking 94%. By the way, you're the first people to see this data. Creativity, 94% of the teachers said, yeah, it's increasing creativity, increasing kids' confidence, and 88% said it is also increasing kids' self-regulation. Did it build teacher-student relationships? 92% said yes. Self-reflection on their own practices? 88% said yes. Did it promote student agency? 79 said yes. Deliver classroom curricula better? The same curricula that they had to deliver. Did it deliver it better? Were the kids learning better? 79% of the teachers said yes. And did it help them differentiate instructions? How many would recommend it? Well, you're seeing high numbers here too. 92% of the teachers said, I'd recommend it to other teachers. Then we sent in independent observers. They went in and they were just looking at what they could see. They didn't really know what the teachers had done, but they were trained to watch. And we had some who had less than 2 months of coaching and some teachers who had 2 or more months of coaching. Let's see what it looked like. Did the students have more voice and choice? Yep. Here's the line for more than 2 months of coaching. Here's what it looked like when you had 2 or less months of coaching. Teachers communicated ideas in a varied way. That's that iterative. 50% higher. That's amazing. 4 months of coaching, or 2 or more months of coaching, sorry, or less than that. What did we get? Were there more student contributions? Were teachers asking more questions to create more dialogue? 43% higher when they had more coaching. And did teachers thoughtfully respond to students' extended learning? Yes, they had discussions, 30% higher. And were there more connections? Yes, you can see in one of these, 135% higher. Was there more enthusiasm and positivity? Yes, 51% higher. I wish I could go through all these numbers with you, but you'll have access to the PowerPoint later, and you can do that yourself. Bottom line, we're still looking, we're still out there in schools, but I think so far, the research looks really promising. In Connecticut and New Hampshire, there's actually legislation now that mandates training and the implementation of play-based learning. Oklahoma and Massachusetts are already training in purposeful play in kindergarten and first grade. Alabama, New York, Oregon, and PA are also looking at playful learning. And in fact, I just learned this week that our colleagues in Oregon may put up some legislation that will mandate playful learning in kindergarten. Point is, this is becoming a movement, and you can be a part of this movement. We also have a lot of materials that we've developed that we are willing to share. They're in Spanish and they're in English. This is part of our outreach. We have newsletters, and you are all welcome to use anything. It is all open source. We have created an instrument for observing, and that is open source as well, and for teacher responses. You can join us. Finally, we have manuals for our coaching and for our study administration. And again, these can all be part of your repertoire, along with videotapes that were just released today to show you what this looks like and can look like in a classroom. Importantly, active playful learning isn't just for kids. I also use this in my college classrooms. So I want you to be a part of this movement, and also to see that we can do APL in schools, but we're also applying it more widely. We're applying it in playful learning landscapes and communities. We're applying it in the school classrooms. Making Schools Work was a way in which we put out what happened in New Hampshire, and we put out some of the data from Michigan. These were our pilot studies, and Kim can tell you more about what's going on in New Hampshire now. And we also are looking at the digital world and what we can do in the digital world. So I want to thank you all for coming today and learning about what we're doing in our study. I'm going to stop sharing so we have more time for discussion. And at another point, I am thrilled to share with you what we're doing in communities as well.
Kathy, thank you for sharing such powerful, not only data, but showing an example of play-based learning being utilized at one of the schools you've been working with. We still have a little time, and normally the question and answers I would wait until the end, but because these questions are specifically for you, Kathy, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask a couple of the questions that are in the Q&A. Someone wants to know, what is the difference between playful instruction and guided play?
Oh gosh, there is so much that's different. In playful instruction, you're trying to make learning phonics fun. And it should be fun, but sometimes we don't use the exact right ways of doing it. Let me give you an example. It's a beautiful metaphor that came from the digital world, where they said, we're trying to teach by using bells and whistles, but we're creating chocolate-covered broccoli. Bottom line is, the kids figure out it's still broccoli, even if you cover it with chocolate. So it has to be playful and intentional, but it really has to be active and engaging and meaningful. I'll give you an example that we actually saw, found it on YouTube. There was a teacher who wanted to teach word learning and blending. So she had a fly swatter task. And the kids each got a fly swatter, and they were supposed to swat the word when they found it. Now, when they were done swatting each other and just swatting the paper because they liked to swat the paper, they sometimes did learn the words. But it was very momentary and it wasn't deeper learning. In our system, we're trying to change what goes on in that classroom to have smaller groups, to have voice and choice, all the things that make it active, engaging, meaningful, socially interactive, and joyful. And I think when you put that into your curriculum, you're not just going to get a playful moment, but you're going to get something that's intentional learning that is done through a playful pedagogy. I hope that the example made it clear.
Kathy, just one more question from the
Sure.
Q&A. How
Sure.
is agency determined in regard to the children, and how does that interact with the directness of the teachers?
Well, as the teachers, and I'm glad you asked it the way you asked it, because the key is directness. Um, Once we have planned a good lesson plan, and Christy's really the expert, so I should ask her to come in and answer this question because she does it. I'm just explaining it. So Christy, I don't know if you want to come in and tackle it. But as I see it, Kids have agency when they have choice. That they have agency when they have a voice. And a lot of times we take that away from them by directing everything. And when everything is scripted and directed, the kids don't learn as much as they do when it's their own discovery. But I'm going to let Christy take it from here.
No, I agree with you, Kathy. In my kindergarten class, a lot of what we do is chosen from the play from the children, what their passions are. There are many times when lessons just have to pivot, and we kind of hook them of what they want to do, and it just makes it more meaningful and more successful. And that can go for a math lesson, a reading lesson, a phonics lesson, or how we kind of teach at my school thematically through it, one theme.
And I want to say too, it's not just free play. It's quite intentional the way you design these things. And we give examples. In fact, Christy's the one on our videos who is giving the examples to show teachers exactly how you do this. It's not just rah-rah cheerleading. It's very intentional in the way you put that curriculum in the classroom.
Thank you, Kathy. And I know we have so many questions in the Q&A. So Kathy, while we're talking, if you can check out the Q&A and possibly put some of the answers online, I know that would be very helpful. But
got it.
Christy, I want you to come back on line because you're the next person I want to ask some questions of. And first of all, Christy, thank you for the work you do. Teachers have my greatest admiration, but I'm going to tell you there's a special place in my heart for kindergarten and middle school teachers.
I agree. I totally agree. I think it takes a special person to teach middle school. And I just really enjoy the energy and the love in kindergarten. I think I get a laugh every day, and it's really fun, and it's really my passion. So thank you for that.
You're so welcome. Can you share with the group your experience from your perspective on the importance of lifting up playful learning, especially considering the research Kathy just shared?
Sure. One of the things I get so inspired by Kathy's research and what she does. So I just thank her and her team for everything that she puts out. But I think adapting a playful learning environment in the classroom is really, really important. And one of the reasons I feel so strongly about including guided play in my classroom is based on Kathy's belief that children learn best when they're actively engaged, where the learning is meaningful and it's joyful, and more often than not, it's socially interactive. The way we teach at my school, and particularly in my classroom, is that we teach thematically. And that means that all of our teachers come together in the fall for a thematic teaching around a central theme. So every classroom might be taking a journey somewhere, or they might be in learning about a particular city. We feel that when we teach a topic in isolation, it robs the students of understanding it in its entirety. So the way that I, in particularly, implement playful learning is around these centralized themes. And I usually do about 3 a year. I didn't really start as 3 a year, but you can do a weekly theme, you could do a bi-weekly theme. And I think one of the most important things is that when the teacher is engaged, when they show the passion for what they're teaching, it kind of starts sprinkling the magic and little seeds within the classroom. I also think that making curricular connections results in a deeper understanding of the topic. And thematic learning is when students can relate their experiences to one another, and it gives a deeper and meaningful experience. I'd much rather dive deeper than go wider. So, like I said, I always develop a theme around something that I am passionate about. If I provide a lot of energy or a lot of joy about it, it kind of rubs off on the kids and they want to learn more. And then they take some more ownership on their learning. So I usually pick an anchor text of some sort that kind of guides our theme. And then we have a lot of supporting text that go with that. We then incorporate some social studies and some science in various ways through the theme. We kind of bring in that math as much as possible. Math is math, but we can do it through measuring. We can do it through graphing and a lot of sorting activities. And then once a theme develops, we kind of sit together with my teaching partners and we think about the other ways that we can bring in different aspects of the curriculum. What can we do with the music? What can we do with art projects? What can we do with maker education? Are there recipes? Are there games that we can play? Where's the writing and the poetry? Can we have presenters come? Can other kids in the other classrooms come in to present? So it kind of builds this wonderful, engaging, meaningful environment where the kids just take their ownership. And then when you have that free play, you notice that what they're learning about comes out. And that's how I kind of judge how successful a theme may or may be. And through this, I mean, when you teach thematically, that collaboration and the communication and the content is right there, that it just makes it really joyful for everyone involved.
Wow, Christy, you pretty much really answered my second question, because I was going to ask you about connecting the systems and to expand on that a little bit more.
Sure.
What's the importance of connecting different areas of curriculum around a central theme for young learners?
Yeah. One of the things at my school that drew me to be an educator here is also I wanted my children to experience as well. I think, some of the teachers in my school call it sticky learning, right? I can tell those that graduate from 12th grade exactly what we did based on our themes, because they lend themselves to plays or classroom projects and in maker education. Let's take one of my themes that I've done. So in the last 25 years, I've done the rainforest, a journey to the Amazon rainforest 4 times. And each time when you work on a theme that's successful, you kind of build on it. So you can sprinkle some of the magic right as a visual, right? So when you walk into my classroom, there are, paper vines hanging from the ceiling. There are a great kapok tree on my wall, and embedded are snakes. There's children's artwork from what we've learned all around the walls. So I always start one of my themes with going someplace, whether it's an imaginary place. So everyone grabs a passport and a boarding pass and we board a plane, and it kind of gets them excited. We take a class picture using a green screen and we superimpose wherever we may be. So that's really kind of how we kick it off, through a visual, an imaginary, playful experience. And then we really dive deep over the next few months. In my winter units, we focus on a lot of geography, some of the standards where we teach. So after we learn about the continents and the oceans, we kind of dive deep into the Amazon, where that is. And then we just kind of start asking questions. This also coincides and aligns with my informational reading unit. So we talk about what is the role of a reader and a learner when we look at informational books. They get really excited, and from a list, they get to choose an animal that they want to learn about and become an animal expert. So we have child-friendly text. We have a one-to-one iPad program at my school. So we have some apps that are able to read the text for them. They become experts, and they write a mini research paper in kindergarten where they may understand some vocabulary words like diet and habitat, their life cycle. They learn everything about their animals. They work together. So if some of our friends pick the 3-toed sloth, they will work together. They work with their buddies to kind of help become these experts. They learn about informational drawings. And then once they're learning about this, we collaborate with our maker ed, and we are making a huge interactive board through Scratch Junior and Makey Makeys, where they create their animal, they put it in the layer of the rainforest, they touch a button, and it's their voice that is recorded that tells and teaches others about their animal. So, that is one way that we can build confidence in these children who may not want to present in a large group, but their voice is being shared. So we have little projects going all over the different areas. In math, we measure the rainforest animals. We make stop motion videos with their animals. They become the expert. It is it goes through their writing, it comes out in their reading, and it really becomes a meaningful experience. Especially, you can tweak and add different themes and different parts depending on your class. A few years ago, I added a whole the history of chocolate and how the cacao tree grows in the Amazon. And we measured, and then we made a model, and then we made a chocolate factory. And we tasted different kinds of cacao, which is always a hoot with 5 and 6-year-olds. When you give them something that's like 80% cacao, they think it's, delicious, and it's not. They create their own recipes and create their own chocolate bar. They become, so it's kind of all these different areas kind of come together, and the energy is absolutely wonderful. I still have past students that come into my room every morning and says, hey, are you going to do the rainforest this year? Are you going on an imaginary trip? Are you going to make chocolate? They remember everything. And it's really fun to see when we present to the entire school comes in and visits our classroom, and they present their information. They present what they're learning. They present facts and things that they learn that it's pretty cool when the 5th and 6th graders come in and they learn something and they want to make their own interactive board in their class. It gives a sense of confidence to the kindergarten students.
Christy, thank you so much for sharing what is happening in your classroom. If my children were 5, I would want them in your classroom.
Thank you.
The way you connect them to several different content areas, using a theme base as the foundation and ensuring that their learning is meaningful, but at the same time, play is built into that infrastructure. And you talked about iPads and connecting through technology. And so that really lends the conversation now to open up to Loretta. Loretta, you have just released a powerful book, Technology Touchpoints. I can't wait to read it, that analyzes the influence of technology and social media on human development with parents and families in mind. In your book, you made a point of lifting up the kinds of playful and intellectually challenging environments that kids need online and off. I'm so glad that you're using a combination of online and off, and that aligns with the science of learning and literacy. Can you dig into the importance a little bit further and how it might connect with the research we've been uplifting today?
I would love to, and thank you so much, Dr. Green, for moderating today. And absolutely, I want to be in Christy's classroom every day of the week. I don't know if I want to be a parent of one of the children. It feels like it might involve a lot of parent engagement as well. And I'm kind of full plate, but I'm excited to hear all of the ways that children are getting to learn in your classroom, Christy. I am very happy to be a part of the conversation today. And I did write a book, Technology Touchpoints. It was published 2 years ago by Roman and Littlefield. And the subtitle of the book is Parenting in the Digital Dystopia. So I jumped into that project. My work is as a clinical psychologist, and my scholarship has always focused specifically on trauma and resilience. And so there's nothing in that background per se that is very media specific or technology specific. But as I write in the book, it's a creative nonfiction. So it's sort of family memoir, community memoir, but also a really deep dive into some of the research and um, history underlying how we get to the technology picture that we have. And I'm coming into today's conversation focusing on um, play and play-based learning and engaging children in learning through play, and where does technology and sort of digital media fit into that conversation. Um, one of the points that I bring forward in my book comes out of some developmental research and a framework called touch points, which was really around infant mental health and supporting families of young children as children reach certain developmental milestones, these touch points where the child is unlocking some amazing new capacity, but in unlocking that new capacity, they are often not sleeping like they used to, or demonstrating their sort of know a lot more than they used to, or somehow disrupting sort of the status quo in that family. And in the touch points framework model, you can support families as these predictable moments happen. You can sort of offer them some anticipatory guidance so that it normalizes the distress that they will feel when systems seem to be a little bit unbalanced, but also helps them recognize that indeed there is some great new capacity that is about to unfold for their child. So in terms of technology and young children's ability to learn through play, um, sometimes I found through my research and preparing this book that the argument is often very binary. We either allow children unlimited, unfettered, and early access to technology, iPads in Christie's classroom, how amazing. Or in fact, we shut that down because the most important thing, especially for young children, is the physical, is the here and now, is the tangible. And what I found through really looking at across the human lifespan, what are the different developmental touch points? What are these moments when new capacities unfold? And they don't just unfold when we're infants, which is what the original framework really focused on up through age 5. These touch points happen across our lifespan. And technology, whether we're talking about digital media, iPad access, for instance, or a pen, which is a technology, allows us to do something we weren't able to do consistently well before. And so any technology can be experienced because of our need to connect to what it allows us to do. So for little kiddos, that device and their attraction to a device, say, in a way that might be concerning for teachers or parents or classroom curriculum developers, um, we don't necessarily need to approach that as a danger zone. We can appreciate that by empowering a child to utilize that technology in a creative way, one that allows them voice and agency and not only access to information in sort of a unidirectional way, but allows them to create and to generate. That will be much more meaningful for the child. It will be much more joyful potentially, right? If they're supported in that effort. And that's oftentimes when we look at the kinds of uh, digital media that very young children want to engage. If you have a child who's in that kindergarten stage and they're allowed to utilize um, their own digital media device, or they're allowed to watch videos of other children using digital media devices, you will know the term Roblox and you will know the term Minecraft, because these are digital spaces where there is some degree of choice and agency and um, social interaction that unfolds in these play spaces that are online, which meet these very specific needs that Kathy was outlining before, and help if we can understand and appreciate how they're meeting those needs, we can then understand why children are so fixated on these screens and on the content. And it's not to say that we shouldn't have some pause or limits or boundaries that we set, but it is to say that when you line up the kinds of critical factors that Kathy's research is unfolding for our classroom spaces, you can understand how savvy, commercially minded developers can leverage those same features as they create interactive digital content, which our children will consume.
Loretta, thank you so much. What is one thing you would share with teachers that are using technology in their classroom on how to help support children? I would be naive to think that we can't use technology, but how do, just so that some teachers are very frightened by allowing their children access to technology outside of what I would call store-bought programs, like programs that we buy specifically for instructional software, instructional software programs.
Yeah. Well, I would say, and I was referring back to some notes I was taking from Kathy's slides. I think there's some factors that are outlined in active playful learning that would very neatly correspond to some general recommendations in terms of adopting technology for a classroom, right? That small group, that choice and voice, that those things would still be relevant here. I also recognize, and a point that I do come to in the research that I did for my work, is that this is really any concerns we have about technology, whether that be, the immediate, risk of, oh my gosh, the device dropped and it broke and now we can't replace it, to, that more core risk of like, oh my gosh, who's seeing these children? What are my children seeing? Whether you're a parent or a classroom teacher. The reality is that these tools are developed because of our international defense battles and our international interest in reaching space. And so there is not, and that sounds really bizarre. Do you think about like Roblox and NASA? However, that's what my research actually did find, a real connection between the development of these tools and technologies and what they really were derived from, which is these, communication technologies and defense capacities. And so we should understand as parents and teachers that there's very little that we as an individual user are going to be able to do to, really limit all the potential power and risk associated with these tools. So we have to be realistic, and we don't have to do this alone. Just as, we have Kathy's research, launching initiatives and legislation, finally attorney generals across the country are coming to, enforce some ability of regulatory authority over certain social media type companies. There are lots of early children digital literacy education and programming at the nonprofit sort of more local level. And so if this is an area where teachers are finding a hurdle and not really sure how kind of free range to be with this, they can reach in and find more structured programs that can give them that training and that understanding, because there's lots of ways that we can empower children to create their own, interactive digital spaces that don't necessarily open the same risks that we might could be concerned about when we hear that just as an idea.
Thank you, Loretta. We've heard from Kathy as it relates to the research. We've heard from Christy, the using that research in her classroom, the practitioner, and now we've heard from Loretta how this also impacts technology use. Now I want to bring that all together to see how does that impact policy. So Kimberly, after hearing these important findings and experiences, I'm hoping you could share with us a little bit of your experience in advocating for beneficial policy changes within state political systems. What has that process been like, and how is APL preparing other states and communities for that process?
Thank you so much. And I'm so proud of this. Everybody staying on time. I mean, kudos to you all. I'm actually going to call out Jennifer in the chat because she raised this question earlier, and I really liked how she framed it from these different levels of supports that we need to make this happen. How do we, how do we make changes at the school and in the classrooms, but how do we make changes at districts? How do we think about what are the roadblocks at state and bigger policy level? So there's been a great thread of conversation about these potential roadblocks to really thinking about getting this more broad-based view implemented. And I actually, serendipitously or fortunately, came to our change in New Hampshire from kind of the backwards side. It was actually a legislator in our state, Victoria Sullivan, who identified, because we moved to a full day kindergarten approach, that what her child was now getting under this new full day kindergarten looked very different than what her child who was in kindergarten before this change, and really pushed from a grassroots effort to say, legislation wise, we need to make sure that we're preserving what kindergarten is meant to be and not have this, as somebody had previously said in the chat, this push down of academics and content focused instruction into these early grades. We really needed to boost up what we know is developmentally appropriate practice, which is active playful learning is developmentally appropriate practice, into the kindergartens. So it was interesting that the legislation came out and led our conversation. But where I really fit into this, and where I think about how all these layers are important to think about and peel back, is that that was an unfunded mandate in our state. And schools then went to our Department of Education, our state Department of Education, and said, okay, we're supposed to be doing this play-based learning thing, but we don't really know what it means or how to implement it in our classrooms, and be beholden to this legislation. So the Department of Education then reached out to me, knowing that I am somebody in my state that studies this research, and said, okay, can you help us? Can you do trainings? Can you do provide resources to help us bridge this gap? And so I think there's something important about, you can either build it from the classroom up. So let's make a change within a classroom, make a change within a school, and try to, change school boards' perceptions of what this means and decide that we want to allocate time and resources in our schedule to it. Or you can even think of it from the state level trajectory. And so I think there's not one formula that is right. What I think happens is, this was also mentioned in the conversation, is that it really becomes a community and multiple people from multiple reasons coming together around a common purpose, that we really can see this groundswell of change. It could be the mom of the kindergarten student who's seeing this. Then her insights are aligning with the researcher in their state that studies this and saying, yeah, we're seeing this real shift to more academicization or schoolification of the early grades. Maybe this isn't such, and research is showing us that this maybe isn't the most developmentally appropriate thing to do for kids in kindergarten and the early elementary grades. And it takes that also aligning with a school board or a principal or a superintendent that also sees how this aligns with their priorities. And then also having a Department of Education that is required to enact the law or hold the state school districts beholden to that law in place. And so I can give you one example of, I think, was probably the most impactful change I saw in our state to make lasting change, which was the Department of Education went in and changed our accreditation standards for early childhood programs. So programs that grant licensure for teachers to teach, in our state, it's birth through grade 3. That they went in and put in those accreditation standards that all programs now that are producing teachers of the future have to teach about developmentally appropriate practice and have to teach about play-based learning. To me, that was such a thoughtful change at our state school board and at our state department to say, okay, we've got this legislation, but there's a big gap here. And so what I think it is taking a step back and looking at all the levers or all the tools in our toolbox, whatever analogy you want to use, to think about how we can come together to provide a groundswell of movement towards this goal. And I think what Kathy's presentation does and what the resources we can say, go to the website, send us an email, we'll send you things. What we can do that's really helpful there is give you the talking points. I think I was, until I started talking with legislators, I didn't realize how important it was to have that elevator speech, getting it down to like 10 minutes of really being able to say what this is. So what we can help with, and what I think, which I really like about Kathy's work, is we can give the talking points to you. And we've been working with different states. I meet with my Northeast Consortium of states, and we're expanding to others to just be able to share this vital information so that we can bring it back to our states, bring it back to our districts, bring it back to our local school, and try to make this movement happen. So I really encourage us to equip ourselves with the information that we need to make the change, and anybody equipping that, be it the parent, be it the teacher, be it the principal, be it the state superintendent, whoever it is, so that we can then align with the priorities and needs of our unique states and our unique communities to address that. But many levers to pull, but that also makes it hard to make systemic change. But I think together we can do it.
Thank you, Kimberly. We absolutely understand how policy that happens, whether it's at the state level or the local level, has the ability to impact practice. And when that happens in schools and classrooms, many times teachers are willing, they have the open mindset to try something different, but all too often we just leave it there for them to figure it out on their own. And so, Debbie, first of all, thank you for your patience as we turn to you for the closeout, because you know firsthand about coaching teachers to implement active, playful learning. What are some things you've done in that coaching process to make this accessible and achievable for teachers and school communities?
Yeah, thanks. Personally, I think the most important thing is remembering that adult learning is really not that different from teacher learning. And so if coaching is designed to promote adult learning, we need to go back to those pillars that Kathy shared on her first or second slide. Is it engaging for the teachers? Is it connected to their lives? Is it iterative? Like, we don't have a right answer, and let me just give it to you as your coach. That is nothing like what we're doing. Do they have some choice and some voice? And so I think really being very, very, very committed to those same learning principles when we think with teachers about their own learning through coaching is the biggest thing. I always say to teachers that we are not the kind of coaches, and this is not the kind of coaching that thinks teaching is easy if only you knew what I knew. We are the kind of coaches that know teaching is hard, the hardest thing there is almost. And that you deserve a thought partner to really sort of think about the hardness of it and dig into it and explore ideas and iterate. And so I think going in with that premise, and that addresses some of the questions I've been seeing in the chat, like, are the teachers resistant? Are they stressed out? Teachers are stressed out because they're being asked to do way too many things. So I think if they have people who are helping them think about how to do things more aligned with how their kids learned and less sort of against the grain, they can take a deep breath. But sure, of course, they're a little bit stressed out at first, like people coming into their classrooms. Are we judging them? Those kinds of things. So you have to get past those kind of human connection points. The other thing that I think has been very helpful is play to, and somebody asked this in the chat, and I think it's true for principals and some teachers, not all, may feel kind of abstract and a little bit scary because how will we get to what we're supposed to be learning or teaching? But when we take that play and break it down to these more concrete practices, like more collaboration, more small groups, more student voice, infusing a little bit of choice into that lesson. The whole thing doesn't have to be choice. We can just find some ways to infuse some choice a little bit at a time and sort of build that skill. I think when we break it down into more actionable practices and we let teachers choose which of these practices do you already feel good at? Well, skip that. Let's go to the one that feels hard for you and think about how we can maybe break it down a little bit. So it's taking this big idea of play, I think, and letting them choose to work towards a practice, working on that for a bit, and then switching maybe to another practice or a different content area. I think that that has helped make what might feel like a big, maybe scary, maybe a little bit abstract idea, and make it really something that feels like it can make progress toward. So to me, those are really some of the biggest things that we do. We try to follow the way that manifests is like in a debrief. We try to have more teacher voice than coach voice, particularly at the start of the conversation. We try to let them sort of think about where their next step might be and what little boundary they might push next time, or how they might take a risk or try something new, those kinds of things. So I think really the parallel makes the learning a little bit deeper for them and also more accessible. We have coaches who love being in classrooms, so I think that helps a lot. I don't know, those are really my thoughts about how that plays out. I'd welcome any questions.
So Debbie, I'm sure that trust has to be built, especially when you're coming from an outside entity into a teacher's classroom.
Yep.
As a former superintendent, I would hear, oh, here's another thing. So
Yep.
how do you build that trust with the teacher?
I mean, so some of it really is in the sort of getting to know you of our initial training. And I think that it is a very authentic respect for the work that they do, desire to jump in. I mean, I go into classrooms, and if somebody needs help, I help, like and that's not just me. That is, we believe that teachers can learn if we're modeling by working with kids, if we know their kids well because we had an interaction with them. It's not just about sort of watching and then commenting. That's not really the process. But I think it is still really a trust process. I think the fact that they get to set their own goals gives teachers a lot of ownership at the get-go and helps them relax a bit, take a little bit of ownership of it. The fact that we've got different ways we can engage with them, we can share resources, or maybe you're just way too overwhelmed, you don't even want this one pager. Let's just talk about it. I read it. Or maybe you want someone to take a group or whatever. We also do very intentionally some getting to know you visits at the beginning, at least one, ideally more, where we just come and get the lay of the land and make sure that we know how they work and how they run things and who in their class is the one they might be the most concerned about, and know them by name and can be another person to help them think about how to make learning great for those kids. So it's a process.
Absolutely. Thank you, Debbie, for sharing. Boy, we've gotten a mountain full of information, but I am going to ask all the panelists to come off mute and turn your video on, because I have a question for each of you. As we get close to wrapping up this webinar, we've seen from the research and from various states, interest in this topic has grown impressively. Can each of you share with us your thoughts and vision for ways in which we can properly scale and capture this engagement and excitement? And in doing so, how can we make sure that all of our community members are involved? And we're not going around any particular order, so just open up.
I'll jump in because if I'm first, then all the pressure's off. So I will actually focus on the how can we make all voices be part of these conversations. One of the areas that my lab focuses on is social equity and developing opportunities for collaboration. And so we are big proponents of play as well. We use them in the form of something we call game charrettes, where we bring communities around a topic and then curate game and play-based resources for them to sort of get into the weeds around whatever that issue is, and then use that as a jumping off point with their families or with their neighbors. these kinds of discussions in a classroom level, at a community level, are really necessary, and we need to be able to bring in multiple types of families and multiple types of perspectives to help shape them, so that the activities and the sort of scenario that's built around a theme can really reflect the values that community holds dear.
Well, I'll just say what we're doing in a lot of the projects. First, let me remind you that active playful learning and the way we talk about guided play, schools are just one environment where we're using this. We're also building out what's called playful learning landscapes, and you can come visit us at playfullearninglandscapes.com. And we also have a lot of writing out on the digital space and how we create balance, but more importantly, how do we reach designers so that what goes on in the digital space isn't just playing games that are going to rote memorize, have you rote memorize phonics or have you rote memorize some addition or multiplication, but rather you're building in a richer palette of what kids need to learn. And I will tell you that we've been somewhat successful with developers, but we need to go farther. If I may just make one comment before answering the question that you asked. We did a study in 2021 with Jenny Radetsky and I think Meredith Meyer, and we found out that of the 100 most downloaded apps, that's 100 most downloaded apps by parents. Anybody want to guess how many of them past the active, engaged, meaningful, socially interactive, and joyful? Not many is right, Deb. You want to take a guess on it? 2 came across the bar. 2.
Oh, look at there.
2. Well done, Diane, and you win today's prize. Okay, so the point is that, I don't think it's that digital's bad. Digital's here to stay. What we need to do is to design the digital in a way that's going to use the principles of the science of learning. And so what we're trying to do is we're meeting with parents, going to the parents' nights, things like that, where you get to see the real people, talking to teachers. Debbie's done a lot of this, talking to teachers about what's important in your community. When we were training the coaches, we took a walk through the community and had them see a different lens on the community. What's out here? You want to do geometry? What are you seeing in the buildings? What do you see in the maps? What do you see as we go down the street? How do we build that in to our lessons? In our community work, we don't pick the space. We can do the science on top of anything. So we say to people, what would you like to see in your neighborhood? What would make it beautiful and interesting for you? And believe it or not, they're designing the most brilliant spaces I have ever seen. And it has their culture. In Santa Ana, what we do in supermarkets looks very different than what we're doing in supermarkets in Philadelphia. What we're doing in bus stops looks very different in Philadelphia than it does when we put up the Loteria game in Santa Ana, because in Santa Ana, they wanted to honor a game they had brought from Mexico. And that helps build attention and memory. These are executive function skills. In Philadelphia, we built a big puzzle to honor Martin Luther King, because on that spot where the community wanted that bus stop, that was where Martin Luther King had given one of the Freedom March speeches. So I think hearing the community is really important, but building the science of learning around whatever is important to you, whatever's important, is going to help us be successful in teaching. And it will yield all those competencies that we want from our children. Last, I just want to end with, I did a little study, but this one's a personal study, not the big study. I live near a Trader Joe's. So I went to the Trader Joe's and I asked anybody who had a child, what do you want for your child? And I gave them 2 choices. I said, would you like your child to be absolutely slam dunk amazing at doing a math and reading test? Or would you like them to know their math and reading, but be good collaborators, communicators, know their content, critical thinking creators, and have the confidence to go forth with the knowledge that they have, to make it, as we were talking about earlier, sticky and transferable to new situations? I have not yet gotten one answer from those mothers at the Trader Joe's of all different cultures that told me, oh God, I hope my kid grows up to be a great test taker. So I think we have to rethink the equation.
Absolutely. I'm going to tell you, Kathy, probably the people on this call will not remember this software program called Oregon Trail. That was the most engaging play base, and now you probably couldn't even find that software program anymore. But the students at 5th grade, they were all over it. They learned so many different concepts from just that one program. So it has been done. They just need to bring their thinking caps to the table.
Can I chime in on this question too, Dr. Green?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I actually want to respond to one of the Q&As, which tells you how divided I am. I'm answering in the chat and not the Q&A. Didn't even know that was a separate thing. So multitasking at its worst here. But I think one important thing when Matilda asked in the Q&A, so I'm going to try to answer this one live, was about how do you build these environments? So I want to spin a little bit off of like, how do you make this change happen? And where I think I've seen the most impactful change in my community is really knowing the priorities and needs of a school district and tailoring your conversations to what's happening in that school. If they're implementing a new school-wide social and emotional learning perspective, or they're doing some stuff around, multi-tiered systems of supports. Think about how this aligns with that initiative that they're already working. One example I can have is that my state, like many others, are getting a ton of push down about the science of reading. And the science and reading is great, but it tells us what to teach. We need to teach phonics. We need to teach phonemic awareness. We need to teach fluency. We have to teach the all-important vocabulary. We have to teach comprehension. But it doesn't necessarily, hasn't given our schools a lens to say, how do I teach that? And so I've been working really closely with our schools to think about how do you take your Heggerty, phonemic awareness, very choppy, very prescribed, really effective. Like if you're talking about like some things are just require rote memorization. But what we've done is just figured out a way, talking to my teachers, to extend that experience, to provide that agency and that choice. So now at the end of our Heggerty lesson where we've been doing blending, we'll do an activity where we are playing Wordle, right? So we're building words, thinking about the phonics. Well, is that a letter blend that we can actually use? Well, what other words do we see that end with the final LL blending sound? Or, so they're able to think about ways to say, yes, I need this mini lesson. I'm going to do my mini lesson. I'm going to teach this kind of, you have to know this information. I have to bestow it upon you. But then they think about, how do I really help children apply and transfer this information? And where I think the magic of active playful learning lies is that it's really about that deep, sticky learning that Kathy was talking about, and that we can use these curated opportunities that are like the ones like Christy said, to allow them to apply that knowledge, allow them to transfer their knowledge to new situations. But where you need to start is what is the unique context and circumstance of this teacher's classroom or this school? And how can we use guided play as a vehicle to make learning more meaningful and joyful for those kids?
I think I may have something to add that may be so obvious, but sometimes we forget it. I think when something is so like we're so passionate about it and there's so much research behind it, the inclination is to talk at people about it and tell them all the things. And I think that we have a lot more success when we talk with people about it, and sort of see where they are and, sort of not show in a sense of here's how to do it right, but sort of like, let's try it this way and see what happens and that kind of thing. So I think really it can be hard when it seems so, I'm reading in the chat and we're all on the same page here, I think. And so preaching to the choir is a lot easier, I think, than getting people to come up and open their mind to it. So it feels to me like even sometimes I'm biting my tongue, because even though it seems to me like, oh my goodness, we really have to do this thing, like to sort of think about how to go back to those pillars and say, there are a few choices here we can talk about. Can we figure out how we got to this way of doing it versus the other. And I think it's kind of important to remember, particularly when we're so convinced, and I'm not questioning that. I just know that that can be sometimes a little intimidating or off-putting.
I just want to jump in and just kind of piggyback of what Kim was talking about, because as a kindergarten teacher with the whole science of reading, and there are parts of my day that cannot just be surrounded by theme. So when we do our phonics lessons, I try and I weave some kind of extension that may come from the kids' love. For example, last year I did a dragon study. Our whole fall project was based on dragons. So for our phonemic awareness, we went on a dragon egg hunt, and in the dragon eggs were beginning sounds, and then they had to match them up with different pictures. So it's kind of this extension in a fun guided play kind of area. Every year we, in kindergarten, we talk about letters, we talk about sounds, how letters put together make words, words put together as a sentence. And so we go on a reading scavenger hunt, and they become reading superheroes. And at the end of their scavenger hunt, they get their reading capes that they kind of use and they wear for following reading lessons. So it's just kind of that little bit of play that makes it a little bit more engaging and a little bit more meaningful for them.
All of you have given amazing perspectives about this particular topic. I do want to let those who are joining us for the webinar to know that a survey, if it popped up before I saw it, please make sure you complete the survey, as we're not quite finished with this conversation, but I want to make sure that you complete the GLR engagement poll. Just to take some personal privilege, we at Children's Literacy Initiative, we also see the family as an extension of play-based learning happening in the classroom by helping parents I don't want to say teach them, but helping engage them in what we're doing in the classroom, that they can do these same things at home. When children know that, oh, I'm going to go home and I'm going to get to do some play-based learning with my parent, it brings the family closer together. Families feel more connected to the school. And so we're sort of bridging what sometimes can be a gap between what's happening in school and then what's happening at home. And Kathy hit it right on the head. If we go find out what's important to them, then we can make that connection in school and at home. And Kimberly talked about policy and the things that come down to local communities. We need to make sure our families know those policies, that they are making sure their voice is heard, whether that's on the local level with their local school board or at the state level where these decisions are made. And so that they have an understanding that we're in this together and supporting one another. Just before we close, I want to make sure that we touch base into the question and answers. Some of you have been answering them in the chat. Others of you have been answering in the Q&A. So I have a quick question here. It is, I think, for Dr. Brady. Dr. Brady mentioned touch points. Is this the same as or different than Brazil touch points? And I may have butchered that word.
Fine, yeah, Brazelton, the touch point.
Brazelton, thank you.
Brazelton Touch Point Center in Boston, yes. So my book, Technology Touch Points, uses the framework that Dr. Brazelton's Touch Points framework uses, where that focuses on 0 to age 6. My book focuses on the technology touch points, sort of thinking about the human lifespan and the ways in which we all have developmental goals that we are achieving across our lifetime, and how technology can feed needs that we have and also put us at risk because of those needs. So thank you for recognizing that connection.
Well, this is probably the largest number of Q&A questions that I remember in participating with grade level reading, and I pretty much attend most of the webinars. And so we do have one more question, but what I was about to say was thankfully most of them were answered through our conversation. But another question that has come before me: has anyone taken a deep dive into the Montessori method and how it can inform and transform K public education? And I'm just going to dip into this answer a little bit because my former school district was one of the few former districts that had a public Montessori program, two public Montessori school choices. And I would say that they truly, they don't corner the market on active play learning, but they really do dive deep into the sense of agency and the sense of voice and the sense of choice for students. So for any others, do you have things that you've taken maybe from the Montessori method to implement in active play learning?
So one of my closest colleagues is a woman named Dr. Angela Lillard. And Angela is the Montessori expert when it comes to the science of Montessori. She's at the University of Virginia, and she has told me on many occasions that Maria Montessori would be really, really, really happy with active playful learning. I would say the only thing that Montessori didn't do was take it up far enough. So I would encourage Maria Montessori to take what she did and take it all the way through college, because I think it's just wonderful, and a lot of her materials have been wonderful. I think the other thing to note is that there's some Montessori schools that are done kind of in the way she wanted them done. And there are a lot of Montessori skills that don't really match exactly what she might have wanted as a Montessori school. So one always has to make sure that these don't become prescriptive, because she really did care about the discovery and exploration of the kids. And I think we do review a little bit of that in our book, Making Schools Work, that Kim is a part of. As I said, this all of our work has been done with teachers. Christy's been with us since the beginning, helping to teach us how to do this right. And so this book is really a compilation of what I've learned from Debbie, from Kim, from Christy. Kim helped write the whole thing, and anybody can turn there and at least see what we got from the New Hampshire data. We can also take a look at some of the schools in Pennsylvania. And we also looked at a school that was a very under-resourced school in Michigan. And one of the authors was a principal there, Carol Lautenbach. So I encourage you to take a look at the book, because then you'll see the theory as it's all laid out. And you'll also see examples from Christy's Friend Central School, from what Kim and group did in New Hampshire, and all these other places to see how we've implemented it. APL is merely the next instantiation of what we've been all working on together. And finally, I do want you to know that we are all really interested in making this tent wide. And we welcome a lot of your comments have been so utterly outstanding. Come join us. Help us put it into teacher training. I think all this is possible, and we would very, very much enjoy working with you to make it the best it can be. So thanks so much.
Well, we've come to the end of our webinar, and I just want to say thank you to Kathy, Debbie, Kimberly, Christy, and Loretta. You truly made this webinar successful, and I believe that individuals will now leave inspired to at least go and investigate and be more curious about active play learning. Sierra, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Sounds great. Thank you, Diana. And thank you everyone for such an engaging conversation. I echo, I think that's might be a record for some new questions and questions asked and chat messages and all of that great stuff. I will say for those who got direct responses to the questions in either the Q&A box or the chat, we will be making that information public as well. So any resources that were mentioned anywhere today, we'll be sharing those with you, as well as any contact information. If our panelists shared that, we'll be giving that information to you as well. So again, really wanted to thank you for your time. As you can see here on this slide, we're kind of highlighting the October 23rd Playful Learning conversation on implementing playful learning landscapes, which hopefully you can all tune into. And then on our next slide, you will see some of our upcoming webinars that we have as well, like Leah mentioned at the start of the webinar. Next week on October 22nd, we'll have an exciting conversation, kind of parallel with this one as well, on building stronger teacher pipelines through university district partnerships. So making sure that we get those educators as well. On the 29th, an exciting conversation on shifting state standards and accountability for learning loss recovery. And on November 5th, we will be having an election day rebroadcast, which will hopefully encourage all of you to go out and vote. While we show that rebroadcast, you can catch it anytime on our YouTube page after 3 p.m. Eastern time, and then we'll return to regularly scheduled webinars. So thank you so much again to our wonderful panel and to Diana for moderating the conversation. Again, all resources, the recording, the slides, the bios, that will all be shared in a follow-up email on Friday. But thank you again. Hope you all have a nice rest of your evening.